Right now, somewhere in this country, someone's sitting on 95 grand a year. They've got a Kia on finance, a rental they can just about stretch to, and a Sunday brekkie habit at the local cafe they pretend not to feel guilty about. And they reckon they're doing all right. Middle of the pack. Comfortable. But are they? Or are they actually a lot closer to doing it tough than they'd ever admit? Today, we're mapping out exactly what separates lower class, middle class, and upper class in Australia in 2026. Real numbers, not vibes. And fair warning, some of these are going to sting a bit. This isn't about making you feel small. It's about knowing exactly where you're standing, because you can't build a plan to move up if you don't know your actual starting point. Let's rip the Band-Aid off early. The typical Aussie household brings home about $106,000 a year after tax. Sounds decent, right? But once you adjust that for how many people are actually living off it, because a household of four splitting $106,000 is a very different story to a single person on that. The real equivalised figure drops to around $67,000 a year. That's the true middle of this country, not the number people quote at a barbecue. The number that actually reflects how far your dollar stretches. And here's the uncomfortable bit. The latest ACOS poverty data shows 14.2% of Australians, that's 3.7 million people, are living below the poverty line in one of the richest countries on the planet. So let's start there, because this is where it hurts the most. If your household's gross income is sitting under roughly $53,000 a year, you're in the bottom 20% of Australian households. Drop below about $32,000 and you're in the bottom 10%. And for a single adult, the actual poverty line, 50% of median income, sits at $584 a week. Call it 30 grand a year. Here's the thing, nobody says out loud. A lot of people in this bracket don't think of themselves as lower class. They've got a job, they clock in, they show up. But having an income and actually getting ahead are two completely different games. And right now, the gap between them is brutal. Think about it this way. Median house rent in Sydney just smashed through $820 a week. Brisbane's sitting at a record $680. Even Melbourne, historically the more affordable capital, is pushing $590 to $600. And the national rental vacancy rate is sitting under 1%. Fewer than 1 in 100 rentals are actually available. So before you've bought a single litre of milk, a huge chunk of your pay's already gone. Add power, add insurance, add the servo prices, and every cost of living increase lands hardest on the people who can least absorb it. This isn't a mindset problem, it's structural. And it's worth sitting with that for a second before we move on. Now, here's where it gets interesting, because what most people assume is rich in this country is actually a much wider net than you'd think. Stick around, because the middle class bracket might surprise you either way. Quick one. Before we get there, drop a comment below and tell me honestly, before I give you the numbers, what income you reckon puts someone in the middle class in Australia right now. I want to see how close the room gets. All right. Middle class in Australia, based on the latest data, spans a genuinely huge range, roughly $53,000 up to around $310,000 in household gross income. Which sounds mad, because someone on $60,000 and someone on $250,000 are technically in the same broad bracket, but their actual lives look nothing alike. One's tracking every dollar in a budgeting app. The other's got a home, a share portfolio, and a European trip locked in for next year. For individuals specifically, the typical Aussie taxpayer earns about $66,000 a year. The average sits higher, around $87,000. But that average is dragged up hard by high-income earners at the very top, which is exactly why so many people feel like they're falling behind when they're actually sitting right in the middle of the pack. And full-time average earnings, the number you hear thrown around most, is about $105,000. But here's the kicker. More than 3 out of 4 working Aussies actually earn less than that. And right now, the middle is getting absolutely squeezed. The RBA has hiked the cash rate 3 times already this year, taking it to 4.35%. Inflation's sitting around 3.8%, still well above target. Long day care now averages $144 a day nationally. And In parts of Sydney, Melbourne, and Brisbane, you're looking at $150 to $210 a day. On top of that, you basically need a six-figure household income just to comfortably cover rent in any capital city. So the middle class is working harder and keeping less. You could be pulling in $120,000 a year and still feel like you're going backwards. And that's not you being bad with money. That's the actual cost of existing in this country, outpacing wage growth for years running. And there's a deeper shift happening underneath all of this. Home ownership used to be the great leveler for the middle class. You bought a place, paid it down over a couple of decades, and retired with something solid underneath you. That pathway is narrowing fast. Fewer first home buyers are getting through the door each year, which means fewer people are topping up the ranks of middle wealth households the way previous generations did. The single biggest wealth building tool the Australian middle class has ever had is quietly slipping out of reach for a growing number of families. Now let's talk about the top. To crack the top 20% of Australian households, you're looking at gross income above roughly $310,000. As an individual taxpayer, the top 10% starts at $166,000. The top 5% kicks in around $216,000. And to be in the top 1% of all individual taxpayers in this country, you need total income above $419,000. But here's the twist. Income alone doesn't tell the real story. Wealth does. Total household wealth in Australia just hit a record $19.2 trillion as of the March 2026 quarter. Property and land values are still doing most of the heavy lifting. The average household net worth is sitting somewhere north of $1.5 million. But the median, the figure that actually reflects the typical household, is closer to $700,000. That gap between average and median is basically the whole story of wealth inequality in this country in one stat. And if you want to be in the top 1% for wealth in your prime working years, you're looking at something like $7.7 million. Here's what really separates the upper class, though. They don't just earn more, they earn differently. Only about 7% of all taxpayers report a capital gain in a given year. Among the top 1%, that jumps to 28%, 4 times the rate, and their typical gain sits around $54,200 compared to $1,900 for everyone else. That's the real dividing line. If your income disappears the second you stop working, you're not upper class, you're employed. Actual wealth is money that keeps working even when you don't. So wherever you land in all this, the number on your payslip isn't your destiny. What actually matters is the gap between what you earn and what you keep, and what you do with what's left over. If you're in the lower bracket, this isn't about shame, it's about awareness. Track every dollar this week, find one expense you can cut. That's it. That's the start. If you're in the middle, stop trying to look successful and start trying to build wealth. Pay down the debt that's actually costing you. Bump up your super contributions where you can. Remember, the guarantee rate is locked in at 12% now, so make sure your employer's actually paying it correctly. And get money moving into investments, even small amounts, even if it feels pointless at first. It's not. And if you're in the upper bracket, don't get comfortable. Wealth without structure is just money waiting to be spent. Protect it. Grow it. Make it outlast you. The bracket you're in today doesn't have to be the bracket you're in 5 years from now. But nothing shifts until you actually look at the numbers honestly and decide to do something with them. If this gave you even one moment of clarity, do us a favour, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn notifications on so you don't miss the next one. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.